Hi, I'm Carrie. Welcome to Saunders Sisterhood. This is a YouTube channel for the single and childless, not by choice person. So we've talked about grief on this channel before. We've talked about sneaky grief. We've talked about like the gut-wrenching grief. And today I'm going to talk about that like grief that piles on. It tags along for the ride grief. This is the grief that like drafts off all the other stressors and hardships in your life. When you're having that particularly stressful time at work, maybe with family, with friends, some event occurs, all the other things that can happen in one's life. This is the grief that then takes advantage of that opening and piles on. You might be regularly living in more of an acceptance stage in terms of being childless, not by choice. But when these things happen, when you have an influx of stress, these grief triggers that generally stay dormant, that you're able to kind of manage most often, maybe they're things that you've worked through, you have some pretty effective coping skills around them. Overall, they're more bumps in the road, right? The announcements, the media situations, the questions, the conversation that are usually more of a moment of twinge or an internal eye roll versus the start of something bigger like a spiral downward. And when you're experiencing a high level amount of stress in your life, those things that are generally twinges or annoyances can become part of the add-on, the pile-on for the spiral downward. You're living your life, you're giving yourself some grace. Things feel generally okay, more often than not. And then the cup is full. The stress gets overwhelming. The distress tolerance dwindles. You have less reserves. Maybe you're just tired due to all the stress and anxiety that you're having to manage and keep at bay. And now is the perfect storm for these twinges, these things that are more dormant, to awaken. And they have the perfect setup in order to just pile on and draft on and feed off of this other stress that's going on in your life. When you're already trying to manage something else, it can be difficult and can become harder and harder when you have other things that you're trying to manage as well. The visual of the cup getting full. At some point, we all have a breaking point. Our cup runneth over. Maybe these extra things are just your self-talk that you can no longer keep at bay. You can't check it. You can't challenge it. And so this negative self-talk starts to creep in a little bit more. It starts to latch on a little bit more. Because you're stressed and anxious, that protective shield starts to form some cracks. And this pile-on grief, this tag-along grief is just waiting in the wings. And so then here it comes, right? As I'm talking negatively, maybe about that stressful work thing or that stressful friendship thing, some of my grief related to not having kids now starts to pile on. So if I'm starting to have some negative self-talk about work or friendships or fill in the blank, this thing comes along for the ride and then starts to say, oh, and you don't have kids. And what's going to happen when you're older? And this wouldn't be happening. You'd be setting better boundaries if you had kids, or you would feel like you had more in common with your friends if you had kids. It all just starts to attach. And now we're in this room, right? Now we're in this room where it all starts to feel connected, even though it's not. Now the larger platitudes start to come, like, why me? Why is this happening? What did I do? All of these things that we can't control, but can really be the start of a downward spiral. And when you allow those things to go unchecked, you're now in some big time grief. So how do you cope with the pile-on? Because we all get them. We all have times where we're tired, we're exhausted, our protective shield starts to get some cracks, or something really big comes through that's new and we weren't expecting. Well, I'm going to give you some suggestions on things that you can try. First, I want to say, consider being firm with yourself. I generally emphasize grace and compassion on this channel, which I will always do and still do. And sometimes having that grace and compassion is firmly standing up to the grief. The tagged on grief is just trying to get a free ride off these other stressors. So be firm with it. You have to be firm. Not mean, but firm. You're going to tell yourself these are feelings, not facts. You're going to remind yourself that you're stressed about something else. And so you're going to lay this bag of bricks down. When you start to ask yourself some questions, you answer the question firmly by telling yourself, and I'm going to be okay. And I will get through this. You are short and succinct in your replies. Visualize yourself doing this. You aren't arguing with yourself here. You're not going to go back and forth with yourself. You're not going to be like, yeah, but what about this? You're not thinking about this. No, you're going to set a boundary with the add-ons by putting a period at the end of the sentence and then moving on. Short and succinct. If you find that you do need to process some of these feelings because you've been triggered, that's okay. That makes complete sense, but you're going to do that at a different time. So we're not talking about shoving them down and then never coming back to them, but we need to get the pile on out of here. It needs to leave the room. This isn't the stressors that are happening in your life. It's none of these stressors' business. We need to clear headspace in order for us to get through the moment. So you can always go back to processing the feelings that you felt when you were overwhelmed and stressed. All right, number 2 is I want you to take some deep breaths to regulate that nervous system and bring your thoughts back to the moment. Pay attention to where you are in the room. Use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, where you use the different senses and you then bring yourself and notice what's happening. So maybe it's 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you feel, 2 things that you smell, 1 thing that you taste. You start to really use your senses to bring your brain thoughts back into the moment. We're going to channel those thoughts and be intentional, away from the future, away from the past, but in the moment. And using your senses can help you do that. Number 3, exercise, move your body, exert the stress outward. Listen to some music while you do this, if that's what you like. This improves your mood in the moment and allows you to build back some stress tolerance. If we think of the cup example, it drains your cup a little bit. Another suggestion that I have for you is consider a quote to remind yourself of something inspirational or a mantra to jerk your thoughts out from the negative vortex. So if the negative vortex is trying to pull you in, we need something that's going to jerk your tail back, whether that be a quote or a mantra. My book, 5 30-day challenges to help you reflect, reset, and reclaim for the childless, not by choice person, has lots of these in them. We have a whole chapter on quotes and a whole chapter on mantras if you need some ideas. I also have a short series that you can take a look at that is based on the book with 15 days of different coping skills that you can use. Number 5, consider talking to somebody. There might be some real stressors in your life that are repeating and taking a huge toll on you, exhausting you, leaving you vulnerable to the pile-on. The more you have to combat this pile-on, the harder it is. These pile-ons can trigger the all or nothing thinking, the catastrophic thinking, where the stress of certain stressors now start that chain reaction where we focus on all the aspects of our life that we're struggling with, and they seem like the most present, the most in our face. And, maybe there are parts of your life that you need to change. Talking with someone about that can be helpful, not only from a strategic level in terms of potentially making change, but it can also ensure that you have a dedicated space and time to intentionally think about what is hard in your life and then get some of that encouragement, support, and guidance around those things. So those are some tips when you're experiencing the pile-on grief, right? That grief that sees an opening and it just takes advantage of it. Remember, grief is normal. It's a part of things. And make sure that you have your toolkit at the ready to help you during these times. Subscribe to Saunders Sisterhood for more videos for the single, and childless, not by choice person.